All right. Hey, Malcolm. It's been nice to see
Hey,
you again. I think last we have a few videos on my channel where it's like one was suddenly I'm drawing a blank. I know one was about interfaces, one was about get talking with your friends. And
explaining stuff. We had one that was like some stuff about friends and trust and stuff like that.
yes, the trust one was good. It's like 7 minutes and it's like intense.
Yeah.
Um yeah, I recorded a video with my ex-boss Dinesh a while ago, and it's like 2 years ago, and it's been getting like shared and quoted and discussed now. Like it's so
Mm,
interesting. It's so interesting how you can record something, and when you first release it, nobody really, like, maybe like a few people watch it or something, but like not much engagement. And then you get
yeah.
engagement way down the line, which again, like, if knowing this, I wish I had been making YouTube videos like from the start.
Mm,
But better late than never, I guess.
yep.
It's so crazy. It's so powerful that a conversation can endure. Like, and then like you can be at work, I can be asleep, and someone else is listening to the conversation that was
Yeah.
already so magical. Anyway, I have a puzzle, right, or a problem or a challenge that I've been working through for the last, I mean, depending on how you want to frame it, I can say it's forever, but I'd say mainly the last couple of years. Because when I was previously I was working on my book Introspect, and that was a very contained problem. Like, how do I write this book? And then there's a lot
Mhm.
of questions and what's in the book, what's not in the book. But, you know, at any given day, if you ask me what I'm doing, I'm like, oh, I'm working on my book. Even if I'm not writing, I'm thinking about it and so on. And
Yeah.
it's funny because now I kind of miss it sometimes because it gave me such clarity of focus and purpose. And since then, I have been working on my essays, which, like, I say it so often that I have like this cadence to it like, and like my wife makes fun of it a little bit, like, in jest, and we both laugh about it. It's like, oh, Visa's working on his essays. What's he doing? He's working on his essays. Like, yeah. And I mean, really, I think the thing I'm trying to solve, and I feel like I've made breakthroughs very recently, although maybe I feel these now and then, but I do feel like over the course of the last 2 years, the first year and a half or so, I didn't feel like I was making progress along the meaningful dimension that I wanted. I was
Mhm.
making progress on a bunch of fronts. I knew what I wanted to talk about vaguely, and I would do all these like dress rehearsals or studies and sketches, and like I know the topics that I care about. I know I want to do something substantial about the problem of wretchedness, which we've discussed before. I think, like, how people struggle to accept help when they don't trust themselves and don't trust other people and so on. That's one thing. I want to write about like smartphones and media technology and how it, how people mix up their sense of what they care about with, no, I'm phrasing it wrong. But I mean, I know what I want to get at, even if it's not, I don't have like the snappy sentences yet, but it's like, oh, people mistake um the map for the territory, right? So they mistake the image for everything. Like, it's like, why? I mean, I guess one of the puzzles is how come some of us use smartphones and Twitter and seem to be happier for it, generally. I think we also get the like frustrations and stuff, but some of us deal with it more healthily than others.
Mhm.
And I want to understand that well and describe it well so that potentially more people can get into that headspace. Anyway,
Nice. Yeah.
that's not even
Yeah,
as
those are
stupid.
just a couple of so I think the pitch that you made to me a
Mhm.
few hours ago. You said, when you have some time, I'd like to record a call with you about messes and intentions, and you quoted a few tweets, and I think we are
Yes.
presently encountering one
Mhm.
such mess
Yes.
that you are describing to me.
Yes.
And I just want to read out a
Mhm.
couple of the tweets that you
Yes,
that you
please.
sent me the screenshot of. You said messes are clutters not just of things but of intentions. That's what makes them difficult to tidy. That's what really makes them difficult to tidy. If you didn't have a clutter of intentions, then it quickly becomes obvious what's relevant and what's not, and eliminating the irrelevant should be straightforward. Put another way, suppose that your roommate moves out and they
Mhm.
just leave a bunch of shit in their room. Now,
Mhm.
there are people who will have a hard time dealing with that stuff, but for many of us, that would be dramatically easier than cleaning up certain kinds of your own mess, because it's just
Right.
like, oh, here's just a bunch of stuff I just have to get rid of,
Right.
right? It just goes
Yeah.
in the trash, or like, oh, Bob can have that, CD that I know he likes,
Mhm.
or whatever the thing is.
Mhm.
Um, CDs. That was
Sure.
the example. But anyway, and like, and at the very least, even if some of those objects generate an intention, like, oh, I should sell this, fancy blender that my roommate left,
Hmm.
like they're not a pile of stale intentions. Like they're not a
Yes,
pile
it's
of
fresh. Yeah,
you've been meaning to do. It's like,
yeah.
oh, here's a pile of things I could do
Hmm.
something with.
Right,
And
right,
you get to sort of allow the intentions to arise as you look at
right,
it, but they're not sort of already stored in the intentions. Oh,
right.
I mean, this video is actually a sequel to one that we made that might be on my channel, um, which is something about how uh the like an ideal intention is in the world, not on your to-do list.
Yes.
We
Yeah,
we had a video about that, right? Like,
yeah.
and it's both the case that like ideally, yes, but also if you've got hundreds of things, it might be easier to store them in a list than in the physical world, right? Like if you
Yes.
have or it might be easier to sort of orient to them. I don't know. It's kind of complex, right? But like suppose that
Hmm.
you've got a dozen projects that involve tweaking some clothing. You want to cut
Hmm.
the sleeves off this thing,
Right.
you want to like and suppose that you've got a sewing machine and you can kind of do these sorts of projects or whatever.
Hmm. Sure.
But you have a lot of other things going on. You're mostly not getting to these at all.
Hmm.
Like you could leave them out on the kitchen table,
Hmm.
right? These various garments that need to be modified.
Hmm.
But you probably don't want them on the kitchen table. But you could leave them kind of on a craft table if you have a craft table. But if you don't have a craft table, if you have a small apartment, like you probably want them in a box somewhere.
Right.
But if they're in a box somewhere, maybe you do actually want to like write down what the projects are somewhere else
Mm.
so that
Mm.
you can kind of like look at them without having to like go open the box.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. It's like an index,
Um,
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think part of the nature with physical messes is that they embody a kind of not exactly urgency, but a kind of immediacy
Yeah, there's a
for
tactile. I mean, I do think that it's a thing that's often felt like a thing that I've desired, and sometimes I am in two minds about this because a part of me is like, well, that might be, in musicians call it gear acquisition syndrome, like gas, like, oh, I want all these, I want more guitars, I want more pedals, I want all these things.
yeah.
Just because, right? And you tell yourself, oh, it's so that I can write some other song, or I can, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's true. That's the messy part, right? I mean, that's the messy
Hmm.
part. Like sometimes a delay pedal might unlock a whole new dimension to your music
Yeah.
that you can't without it, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I think when I was growing up, I was broke and I was very wary of wasting my very limited resources at the time. Not even wasting, but I was just very cautious of spending my resources at the time,
Yeah.
right? And so, in fact, even now, like, I still haven't fully stepped into the truth, which is that I am a professional author at this point. I've written 2 books. I write
Mm.
essays every day. Like, I am a professional author. And in an ideal scenario, I think I would actually even have like two entirely separate sets of bookshelves. Like one for like these are my books at home, and then this is like my work shelf of
Mhm.
books. And again, like if I was a craftsman who was building sculptures or whatever, right? Then it's the separation is very obvious because well, all my sculptures are in my sculpture shed, and everything else is my life. Whereas being an author, there is no intrinsic obvious separation. So I have to choose whether or not I want to make that separation. And
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
are some circumstances where the 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 mess can occasionally be useful, where like because there is a blurring. So I mean, I'll just tell you about the essay that I'm currently working on.
Mhm.
And it's very meta because it's about what we're talking about as well. So the title is tentatively called "Working Episodically,"
Uh-huh.
and so I have all these stray notes that I've accumulated about the topic. About I want to understand how mediums work, like different like paint versus blogs versus Twitter versus books versus essay. Like, what is it the nature of each medium that makes something work? And then the meta game of making mediums is what is of the meta game of producing artifacts in different mediums. The question becomes like, how do you work? Like, what is and so the example that I came to was like, I think I was just sitting around and my wife was watching Sex and the City on Netflix. And I was struck by how skillfully crafted the episodic structure of Sex and the City is, where so people
Mm.
like who criticize the show criticize it on like, oh, the characters are no longer likable in today's age, or they're problematic, or I like, sure, like that's not even the dimension that I'm interested in. The very interesting thing is, how do you write a TV show, or write anything, right, that has an episodic structure that discusses a bunch of topics, that presents multiple points of view, that has a central question of some sort that needs answering. And the way they
Mhm.
do it is they have the lead character, Carrie Bradshaw. She's a journalist. Or she's a weekly columnist. She writes a sex magazine column. And so every episode or every week, she has some question that arises because of like something that happens in one of her friends' lives, or her life. So like one episode is like, is dating younger men good or bad? Or is
Mhm.
having sex on the first date, what's the consequences? And
Right.
different
And the
characters.
whole episode then explores that question from different
Yeah.
angles.
And wonderfully,
Yeah.
like the different characters take different positions. So there's one character who's very, uh, Samantha, I think. She's like, like, have a lot of sex, have as much sex as you want. It doesn't phase me. Someone else is like, no, no, you gotta, these things gotta be just different perspectives. And I was
Mhm.
just watching it like, the funny thing, I remember watching some of it years ago and being like, a bunch of women talking about stuff, like, okay, kind of interesting. But now I'm like transfixed. I'm like, like this is a different perspective, and that's a different, but there are conflicting perspectives being presented, and how that represents the author. So I mean, the author of the book that the show is inspired on is Candice Bushnell, but the show itself is like interpreted by another set of writers, I guess.
Mhm.
And I'm just so fascinated by how the writers use the TV show as a vehicle for presenting a bunch of conflicting ideas about romance and sex and intimacy and trust. Everything is it's very,
Yeah.
I might end up writing an essay about Sex and the City potentially. But so in the essay that I'm writing, I'm trying to learn from that. I'm trying to see how can I present, and I figured that you would be very interested in this as well, because we both have like these very big, expansive ideas about grand topics. And the question becomes, okay, how do you present this to people? How do you keep it interesting? How do you keep people revisiting the idea, right? And how do you, like, so it's like if you jump all the way to writing a massive book, that's in architecturally challenging. And once you're done with that, it's a very big ask to ask of people. Please read this
Yeah.
big ass book, right? But
Yeah.
at the same time, so all the way at the other end, you have, I guess, tweets, and you can just tweet some insights, and people are like, oh, that's interesting. But I was just watching the latest Intellect event. It was live streamed on YouTube, and someone was saying, short form writing can influence what you think, but it seldom changes how you think. And I agree with that, even as a person who tries to use short form media to get people to consider how they think. Like, even if you have great text, right? If you have a great utterance or a great question that may stick with someone for a long time,
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
medium of scrolling through Twitter disincentivizes the kind of thinking that,
Right.
right?
Even if this pithy thing, like if
Yeah,
you found your page a day calendar,
yeah.
might kind of, which by the way is where that quote that I mentioned to you earlier, I think before we started recording, of
Mhm.
like there are so many amazing things to do,
No, yeah,
bursting
yeah.
with it.
So
Um,
so I'm realizing this in real time. Like, that takes intention on the part of the reader, right? So it's like the person scrolling through Twitter, when they see something profound, the reader has to stop scrolling. Oh shit. And you stop, and then you look at it, you think about it. This is relevant to something else I care about. I want to think about this more. I want to consider whatever. And then they do something with it. But the writer of the tweet can't really do much to influence that past the utterance of the tweet itself. Whereas if you manage to persuade someone to read a book, the nature of the book is so much bigger that they are going to be in your contemplative architecture for a while. So,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
it's the medium is
Yeah,
designed.
there's a great quote by Vervaeke,
Mhm.
something about this, which is itself interesting, right? Because he's got the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series, which is more than book length.
Mhm.
Um, it's like 50 hours of YouTube videos, and it's like if you think about what audiobooks are like, that's like That's just massive. Anyway, but he has a quote somewhere in there about how, oh God, it's somewhere around episode 32 or so. I just remember my friend's house who I was driving to and I listened to that one. But
Mhm.
it's something about um that when you really get an author, it's like you take on like you like their perspective like forms part of your perspective.
Yeah.
He phrases it better, but it's something about how like you
Yeah.
have a whole new way of relating, or like a
Yeah.
whole new there's some more
Y-
kind of gestalt
Yeah,
thing to
yeah. So I have a thread about this when I was annoyed with people's threads of lists of takeaways from books. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's just this very reading a book with a specific kind of extractive mindset, looking for sound bites to basically repeat at other people, I guess. But like when I think about my favorite books and what I really got from the books, it's not so much, some very clever, witty phrase. It's the way in which the author sees and considers things. So like, and I can think of different authors and I can even like summon a different author's way of being, right? So like David Ogilvy, he has this very charming kind of
That's the marketer guy, right? Like the
yeah,
sales
he's
guy.
the advertising guy. So he was, it's very tragic what his company has become because he was everything that they are not right now. Like, he was very much like he would turn down clients that he didn't like. He would, like he was very opinionated and forceful and yet charming and like self-deprecating. And he had this, you just being in his presence made you kind of would make you kind of start thinking about, oh, how can I have more of a sense of occasion? That's one of the things he cared about. And then I think about Andy Grove, high output management, and he has like this very analytical perspective. And you read him for a while and you start wanting to analyze your own processes in your life. Like
Mm,
the first chapter is about like imagine a breakfast like a restaurant serving breakfast. Then consider how the eggs are like this and the coffee is like that and so on. And like what if you wanted to make this, if you had to serve more people, how would you do it? And then you start thinking, like, yes, I too am a kind of factory and I too have processes and like, it's
yeah,
not about the factory, it's about the way of
yeah.
engaging with things, right? And like, yeah, some authors are really warm, some are very curious, some are cheeky, and like it's those vibes that I try to embody. And yeah, even with introspect, like sometimes people ask me like and I've struggled to condense it into an essay, right? Like if I could have written an essay that does the job of the book, I would have written the essay. I'm not like I want to spend years of my life writing a book. Like no,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
I
yeah,
if I
yeah.
could be done with it, I would like to be done with it. But I need it's like the equivalent of saying I need you to spend a year in this city. Like I wish I could ask you to spend a week and you get it. But like you need to experience.
Right. This is actually really helpful for me because I've been chewing on a bunch of things that I sort of sense want to be books,
Mhm.
but I, 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 I've been confused because some of them feel like they might not be big enough to need to be a book or something.
Mm, mm.
And yeah, I don't know. Like I mean,
Y-
maybe the thing to do is to sort of like try to write the essay version and then just like watch how it complexifies
Yeah,
or
you
something.
you you could
I don't know.
outline you could outline the book,
Yeah.
and yeah, I'm glad to hear you say this because I do feel like if I can resolve this for myself, I suspect it will generalize far beyond me and be useful to a lot of our peers in terms of
Mm,
how do you how do you know if something wants to be a tweet or an essay or a blog, or a book, and how do you there's this meta thing of like how do you work on it, right? Like
mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
always, yeah, you think?
One of the things that I'm dealing with right now is that I just keep writing drafts and they're good drafts
Hmm.
and they don't feel ready to publish for some reason.
Hmm.
And I keep thinking like there's a thing I wrote over a year ago
Hmm.
called The Parable of the Canoe and the Paradox of Ego.
Hmm.
And I wrote it and I was like, cool, I'm gonna publish this next, tomorrow or next week or something like that. And then as I started editing it to publish it, I was like, man, oh, there's this whole bunch of this other stuff I want to include. And like I spent another 10 hours
Hmm.
adding a bunch of stuff that I think is good, but taking it further from being about to publish.
Right. So okay,
And
here's
then I went back and looked at the original. I was like, I could just publish this,
Mhm.
but I don't think I. And then now it's been a year and I haven't fucking published the thing in part because I kept writing other
Right.
stuff.
Right. I
And
don't
this
it's
thing
yeah,
is now so unwieldy. It's like I
yeah.
don't know how to go back to it.
So
And
yes, yes, yes. So I have the same problem. And I think that I made a breakthrough about a couple of weeks ago that I think may help. And so this is
and
why I'm
this is
so
the one that's about like Sex in the City and concrete
ish
like
similar.
thing. Yeah.
So my version, so the Sex and the City example is a very remarkably like well, how do you put it? Well framed, I guess, and it's very discreet. It knows its audience, it knows its um domain, and it sticks to that domain very and explores that domain very, very well. And I think what our challenge is that we're kind of like this. It's kind of annoying. I would say it's both our best and worst trait, right? Like we don't just want to talk about one thing. We want to talk about all
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And and so the insight that I had was, like so I did find a useful thought experiment to think to myself, okay, if I was gonna make the Visa version of Sex in the City, what will it be about? So I have to pick a sex and I have to pick a city, like you know what I mean? Like you have to pick a topic,
Right.
you have to pick a context. And I would do something like, okay, my city is the internet broadly, and I
Yeah.
might
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
narrow that down to some subset of the internet. And the sex is something like something about identity and meaning and stories, but like yeah,
Hmm.
again, it's that's still so vague, and I have to get more precise.
I thought you would say something about correspondence, like the whole Erasmus thing.
Hmm. I want to do that too. you know but yeah, so but okay, the insight that I had that and it's funny, it's almost like a Watson, like how Watson and Crick, I don't know which one of them, they had a dream of the double helix
Oh,
structure.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I had a kind of a dream of this. I call it the braided loop. Um, it's in my mind. It's like there's a loopy loop thing, and it. So you start wherever, right? You start somewhere. You start looping in, maybe on itself, but maybe not, and then you get a digression. You follow that digression, and then along that digression, you keep your eye on the original thing if you can, or keep one eye on the original thing, and then you loop back. You might complete the loop, or you might go on like another, like like those planetary, the planet, like when they want the planet to do the gravity assist around the, no, they want the
Oh,
satellite to do the gravity assist around the
yeah.
planet. Like if you look up those gifs, it has that
Oh,
loopy
right, right,
function.
right. You don't quite get back to the origin. Instead,
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. So you do that. So, but you do approach the origin, and that is so. Like I think the ADHD or like the chaos-minded problem is, oh my God, I'm going in random tangents forever, and I'm never gonna say anything. Whereas this is like, okay, we start wherever. When an interesting loop, when an interesting digression appears, we're gonna digress. We're gonna follow the digression quite thoroughly slash fully, and there is a skill thing here if you get from practice. But like along as you approach like the apex of that loop, you look back at the first thing and you try to get back to it. And if along here you get another loop, like you get another digression within your digression, you take that as well. But again, now you have like 2 points to look at, but you just keep those 2 points in mind and you keep looping. And then I find that with several drafts that I did, I have about 3 loops. So I had one where I was talking about incompleteness, and then within that, I ended up talking about mediums, and then within that, I ended up talking about creativity. And I'm really proud of that like paragraph of stuff about creativity that's in a digression within a digression. And it just
Mhm.
it became so clear to me in that moment. And I haven't fully actualized this yet, but I still feel very strongly about it, and I think I'm gonna stick with it. Um, so consider this suggestion. Try to put um So all of the things. So if you imagine that you're doing world building for like a fictional novel or something. So imagine all of your work is you're writing a work of fiction. You're building like a Westeros for your Game of Thrones or your Middle Earth for your Lord of the Rings, right?
Yeah.
And so the world building involves all this background lore, and you wanted to start talking about Aragorn and tell the story, but then next thing you know, you're talking about his dad and how like, oh, there was a big war, and then there's some, and you're like, fuck, I'm
Yeah,
getting further.
and in order for any of that to make sense, you got to know that elves live really long.
Yes, yeah. And then so you have to write like the Similarian or whatever, and like there's all this extra shit you gotta do before you can really make Lord of the Rings work, right? And I think that's a good thing. So like I think common mainstream writing advice and stuff is like, oh no, focus on the thing that you're supposed to do. But here the mind fuck that I got was, and this is relevant to what we're talking about regarding intentions being in the world, right? So I think rather than on your to-do list, I think that so every blog post that we try to write is like a protagonist or a main character. And while you are writing that protagonist or main character, whatever digression comes up for you, there is a deeper, truer intention to that, I feel. And then you end up writing like these side characters. And I believe or I argue that these side characters are actually more important in some respects. So that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is, what if all of these main characters that you have been writing actually ought to be side characters in something else? You know what I mean?
Right, right. And this is the thing that I think I was remembering as like, because you tweeted a little bit about this breakthrough, and I had the impression that you were saying, like, what if you started your essay not with the topic of this general principle that you want to get across, but like rather just like, so I was reading this, you know, like short story this morning, and it really got me thinking about the nature of breakfast.
Yes.
Or even just I was having breakfast this
Yeah.
morning, and
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
um, I was struck by something about breakfast.
Mhm.
And you're like, now, one question I have is like, when you do that, do you know which deeper principle you're going to get to, or are you just
Not
starting with
necessarily. So
catches
I
your
mean,
attention?
it does help to have all my shit out. Like so I
Yeah,
have a
yeah.
whiteboard with like, okay, media, wretchedness, kings, sovereignty, attention,
Right, right.
focus, like all of my stuff. Like so, if I wrote and I've now written about like maybe 20 or 30 drafts. And no, so okay, I've written 20 or 30 drafts of the things that I think I would like to write, right? But when I explore when I give myself the freedom to start anywhere, but if you get a digression, that's the real quest. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And all of my digressions, none of my digressions have shocked me. None of them are like, holy shit, this is something Visa would never write. Like, no, it's like I'm writing, I want to write about, I want to write about OK Computer. Like, because I was putting my son, so this is a true story and a true draft. I was putting my son to sleep, and I'm like, let's listen to some music. I play OK Computer, and he falls asleep around Fitter Happier. And Fitter Happier is the song on the album that's the most like weird background noise kind of shit. And kids love that. It's like white noise, womb music, womb sounds or whatever. And so I started out writing about, OK Computer, and then you know, some backstory about it and how when was I when I bought the CD myself. And I'm like, oh, that's I bought it at like Cash Converters, which is like a pawn shop in Singapore. And like there aren't really many of those things anymore. And then I'm reflecting on the nature of change of like how like music or media is transacted. And then I start thinking about CDs and the history of CDs. And that is eventually like, so the way the loop goes, I end up at this, oh yeah, Visa is trying to understand media, basically, right? And it started with a story about me and my son and going to sleep. And it's
Yeah.
like the I think if there's one thing I want to understand better and I want to convey to you potentially is that, so there's a trust fall in this, in that you have some intentions, right? And then you follow the intention a little bit. And in that new space you have created, that and the further you get from kind of your original stated intention, which I feel may be colored slash contaminated. I don't know what's the right connotations to use, but like it's influenced by what you think, what you intend to intend. Okay, yeah. So you may start out with what you intend to intend, right? Which is it a true intention? Is it not? I don't even really care. You start with what you intend to intend. And then as you loop, there is the gravity of what you really intend, or like some, maybe not really, like some deeper intention. And you allow that gravity to pull you away from it. And this might be disorienting the first time you do it, and you'll be like, oh fuck, I wasted my day. I wanted to write about Radiohead and ended up writing about CDs. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
but I do want to write about CDs. And there is something very compelling about how CDs were once everywhere and now they are almost nowhere. And like,
Yeah.
what's that about?
Well, it's funny that I mentioned it in this earlier like hypothetical about the roommate who moves out and leaves a CD. I was
Oh
like,
yeah. I mean, CDs are fascinating to me,
this is
honestly.
a funny example of sort of
Yeah, yeah,
tying
yeah.
back or something. Yeah. It's reminding me of a few things. One of which is like, I mean, I'm reminded of Eigenrobot's tweet, the like everything is monocausal and specifically results from whatever I'm on about right now. It's like part of what you're doing is you're giving yourself the opportunity to like start with something tangible in a more kind of storytelling mode, and then it then ties into whatever shit you're on about right now.
Yes.
And because
Yeah.
everything is monocausal and specifically, comes from whatever shit I'm on about right
Mhm.
now, it's like that's always easy to do.
Right.
Um,
It's really funny. I remember I used to watch TV of like I think the Limitless TV show. So there was a movie at first, and then they liked the premise and they made it into a TV show.
mhm.
It's like a weekly procedural crime solving kind of thing.
Yeah.
And a thing with a lot of these TV shows is there is the weekly crime, right? So the crime again, it's like the Sex and City thing where instead of something happening in someone's dating life, there's a crime. So it's very discreet. You want to get to the bottom of the mystery of the crime and
Yeah.
solve it. And then there is the personal life and slash personal drama of the person investigating and like their friendships and like maybe they're dating someone or they're like flirting with someone at work. So there's like the weekly problem, right? And then there's like these longer arcs of are they gonna get together? Or are they not? Ooh, there's like
Yeah, yeah,
rising
yeah.
tension. And then there might be like some big bad that's like oh no, like or there's some big conflict that's like oh, the guy is actually a fraud or he's actually something. And like we know, but like, are they gonna find out? And that's like the season-wide arc, right? Like some dramatic reveal of some kind. And
Yeah.
yet every episode there is a crime. And um what's funny to me is I used to see like the protagonist might have some issue in their personal life, or and so there's the protagonist's personal life and then there's their professional life, right? And then a breakthrough in their personal life might lead to a breakthrough in the crime scene, or a breakthrough in the crime scene might lead to a
Mm.
breakthrough in the personal life.
Right,
And
right,
I
right,
used to
right.
think that's so good writing and it's so fake, like it's so not real. And then I started doing consulting work with my marketing clients, and holy shit, every single time either I have something in my personal life that can help my client, or
Yeah,
some
yeah,
breakthrough I have with my client. I'm like, shit, I witnessed myself telling them something, and I'm like, I needed to hear that shit. And I'm
yeah,
like, wow, it's the narrative truth of it. It's probably has something to do with like salience and like what's on your mind at any given time, and like,
yeah.
but like still it's so funny and magical and true. Like it's fun.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. One of the other things that the structure that you're speaking about reminds me of, um the whole like braided loop thing and the like following the digressions, is there's a technique for cleaning while ADHD,
Mhm.
called June bugging. And the basic idea is you just you your default, like you have a default thing that you're trying to do, which is something basically like I'm going to clean the bathroom, let's say. Um, but you allow yourself to follow all of the tangents that possibly come up. So it's like if while you're cleaning the
Mm.
bathroom, you realize like, oh, hey, we're actually out of, this thing, and then you like go to your computer to order more. And I mean, computer is a dangerous trap because of course there can be so much stuff there. But let's say instead that, you're out of this thing and you go to your closet to get more, and while you're in the closet, you realize, hey, this closet isn't really organized. It needs an extra shelf in it. And so then you go and get the shelf from the garage, and then like while you're in the garage, you realize that there are some things you actually need to take to your room, and you take them to your room, and you just kind of like bounce around like a June bug is the
Yeah.
metaphor, like, but sort of always returning to the light, which is like the central thing that you're trying to clean. um this is originally laid out in somebody's Tumblr post.
Right. It's funny as you're describing this, I was just thinking that it's like the princess is in another castle in Mario, like you and I was playing The Witcher 3 a long time ago, and I remember being amused at how so you have a main quest, and like to solve the main quest, you got to go on a side quest, and to solve that side quest, you got to go on another side quest. And this it gets to the point of slight absurdity, such that a character like lampshades it. Lampshading is like when you point at the thing and going, "Aha, this,"
Oh yeah,
you
yeah.
know. And so here's a quote. So you must find Dudu in order to find Dandelion with the aim of ultimately finding Siri. Sounds like an awful lot of searching, but I do wish you luck. So this is a character, like an NPC character, and your character is explaining to the NPC what you have to do, so that the player is like, why am I doing this? Oh yeah, I gotta find this guy so I can find that guy so I can find the real person I'm trying to find. And it's just it's for the NPC to say sounds like an awful lot of searching. It's like is is I think yeah, another way of framing all of this is I'm really coming to this idea that like a story within a story within a story is an excellent place to put something. And in Hindu temples, like when I went, I have this set of photos from when I was in India with my dad. They put like to have sacredness, you have a sanctum within a sanctum within a sanctum, right?
Right, yeah.
Or like if you go to a library, it's kind of quiet, and then they have like this restricted section, and the restricted section is super quiet because you're like in the library inside the library, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so it's like the thing I'm trying to get myself to see, and maybe like I'm sharing the idea with you in case it triggers something, or like I'm curious to hear what my commenters might say. It's like maybe, and so Richard Bartlett has this great fucking tweet, which is like everything that lives is grows within something else. Right? It's just a banger tweet. Like I'll send you the sanctum. So like that, it's one of those things that like by itself might not seem that profound, but when you start to consider it in all other aspects, it's like it's so often the case. Like so Slack, right? And it's the founder of Slack, Stuart, I don't know his last name, Stuart something. He wanted to make a games company. He wanted to make games, so he started a games company. And along the way, he made I think Flickr. Let me just double check this. Stuart, Slack, Flickr. I believe it's Flickr, right? Yes, he's he's a Canadian billionaire businessman, best known for founding Flickr and Slack. So the funny thing is, he co-founded Ludicorp to make games, right? And then in the process of trying to make a game, they're like, I need to share these images with my team, and I don't have any fucking image sharing service. I'm gonna make a thing that became Flickr, and it sold for a brilliant amount of money. And it's like, now I can do what I want and make video games. And starts trying to make video games. It's like I can't communicate with all my teammates, with all my fellow game devs. I'm just gonna make this chat thing. I made Slack, and Slack IPO for like $1 billion. And like I have a joking tweet. It's like the year is 2500 2050 something. Stuart is now a trillionaire, frustratedly trying to work on his bloody video game. He's like trying to build a video game company, and every time he tries to build a video game company, he accidentally makes another like super excellent software company. And I love that. I love that so much.
You know what's actually really funny about that too is that the company's called Ludicorp.
He set himself up for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so
This reminds me of something that I noticed the other day. I had built a new feature for Intend, and it was mostly finished, and I got up one day and it was a wide open work day, kind of nothing on my plate, which I really love for reasons that'll become obvious in a moment. And so I put the finishing touches on the feature. There's a couple little bugs that needed to fix or whatever, and wrote this um wrote this newsletter kind of announcing the feature. And then while I was writing the newsletter announcing the feature, I was like, man, there's a section in this newsletter where I really want to link to this blog post that I wanted to write. And I think, sort of made a stub for it at some point called Fractal Reviews, which is actually itself partially about the thing that we're talking about, the fractal reviews being like on, yearly, quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily kind of scales, which is a little bit like the Sanctum thing on some level. Um, and so I was like, well, let me just go write that now and then I'll publish it and then I can link to it in the newsletter because it'll have been published. And then I start writing through the Fractal Reviews post describing how Intend has these really cool fractal review systems. And I get to the point where I'm saying, yeah, yeah. And it's so cool because the reviews go all the way up from daily to yearly and then all the way back down. Actually, they don't go back down very well. They go back down from yearly to weekly, but then there's not really a good bridge from the weekly reviews back to the daily intention setting process. And so I was like, shit, I can't publish this and not feel a little bit embarrassed.
Wait, say that again.
And
Embarrassed?
so
Why?
embarrassed because I'm saying, the fractal reviews go all the way up and all the way back down. And I realized that the app doesn't actually go all the way back down. There's this missing piece where it's hard to access the weekly reviews from the daily intention setting when you're like, what am I doing towards my goals today or
Oh,
whatever.
okay.
It's
Right.
like, there's like one little feature that kind of bridges between the
Mhm.
two of them, but not very well. Like there's no way to just sort of see the context of your weekly review as you go to like set your intentions for the day. So I'm like writing this post. I'm like, fuck.
So are you gonna change the architecture of the thing? Like, are you gonna
I
make it
did
excellent, beautiful?
before publishing the post.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So
And
that's
and
the real shit.
and I did it all that same day.
Oh shit. Nice.
It was one of those things that once I sort of put my mind to it, I'd sort of
Mhm,
been meaning to do it for years,
mhm,
but it seemed too complicated.
mhm,
But the impetus of I want to publish this post so I can link to it in this newsletter caused me to be like, well, I don't want to publish this post while the app has this problem.
mm. Yeah.
And wait, maybe I can solve it. Like, and I didn't like commit to solving it. I was just like, well, could I solve it today?
Awesome. Yeah.
Um, and it turned out I ran out of time in my day or something else happened before I closed the loop. Like basically I started with, ship this feature. Okay, feature shipped. Publish newsletter. Oh wait, to do that I need to publish blog post to publish or like publish feature announcement. To publish feature announcement, I want to publish this essay. And then to publish the essay, I want to ship this feature. And where I got in the stack was I shipped this other feature and then I wanted to make a couple images for the post and just didn't have time to and sort of finish writing. I didn't have time to do that day. And so those two remained not done. And I ended up eventually just being like, you know what? I'm going to publish this newsletter and link to the draft of this fucking essay, which I still have not managed to publish, but like
Yeah.
there's not that many people who will click on it yet. And then like I can finish the actual essay like in a bit, but at least I've got, sort of clean things out a bit.
Right.
But it was so satisfying. And again, getting to this loopy structure that you've been talking about here, part of what I end up talking about in this fractal reviews essay that is not yet published, but I can, we can put a link to that in the description of this as well. Like the draft, if whatever. But part of what I talk about in there is how part of what's powerful about doing reviews for your goals or for your like large scale intentions in your life is that as you do them, you immediately notice actions that you want to take like right now that you
Yeah.
can just do while you're reviewing. And so you can get partway through a review and then you're like, I'm gonna just go do that though. And
Mm.
and that happens for me most often with things that are like, I realize I should text somebody about something, or I should ask some question, or I should set some ball moving,
Right.
right? And um and so it's very easy to just take 1 minute, send the message, come back to the review, and kind of keep going.
Mm.
Um,
I would even say that in a
yeah,
lot of cases, if you get distracted from your review to do something that's aligned with what you want to be doing, like that's a good review that was halted. You know what I mean? Like
totally.
I
Totally.
remember I was reading A Timeless Way of Building by Christopher Alexander. I was
Mm,
reading it to look for inspiration to like sort my notes better and stuff. And I read
mhm.
about 20% of the way through. I felt like I got the gist of it along the way. And then I read something that really kind of like I can't even remember what it was, but like it really resonated with me. I'm like, all right, I gotta put this down and go and like radically change stuff in my notes. I don't even remember what I changed, but like I remember the feeling, right? And I felt like going by the vibe of the book, and Chris, like, he starts the book with like, the gestalt of the whole book is more important than any specific thing. So like you can read the first line of every
Yeah,
paragraph,
and just
every
skim the
chapter.
titles and stuff like that. Yeah.
And so I feel like if he were around and he saw me do that, he'll be like, fuck yeah. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
like
yeah.
the point isn't to
To read the
worship.
book.
Yeah, the point, like, you can come back to it. It's a conversation, right? And I probably will go
Yeah.
back to it at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really, all these things are connected. I feel like there exists a way of understanding how information is to be presented, how information wants to be presented in writing, in blog posts, drafts, YouTube videos, tweets, whatever. And I feel like a lot of us are operating with like it's a very haphazard understanding, which all understanding is, I guess. But like,
Mhm.
I get the sense that if we come to a more, I don't know if enlightened is the right word, but like just a better understanding of how this shit works, we should be able to kick something into overdrive. And it might be the rate of communications between people, potentially. It might be the rate of publishing of essays and stuff.
Yeah.
So one thing that helps me is so now that I have my Substack as like kind of my I think of it as my front stage like performance space. I also have like I have my main blog, which is like a vestigial, not
Hmm.
vestigial. It's a blog that I've had since I was a kid, and it's like
Yeah.
I've moved it around and changed stuff around and stuff. And um I have posts on my blogs that are just collection of notes. Like and like I have some that I share a lot. And every time I share a post, like so I have one called Most People, right? And
Yeah, I love that one.
so every time I see somebody say most people, I share that blog post. And every time I share that blog post, I look at it, I'm like, this could be a bit, it could be a bit more in order. It could be a bit easier to read. It could be a bit whatever. And I update it a little bit. And someday maybe I'll do a very substantial essay about it. Like it does repeat itself a bunch. It's like it's not
Yeah, yeah.
reader friendly, but like it's friendly for me, right? It serves my
Yeah.
purpose. And I will, again, it's like the thing you're saying about the intentions not being in you in a to-do list, but in the world. It's like that blog post will it wants to become better in interactions with people. It doesn't
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
be
yeah.
better with interactions with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, this is like I think like I think we are so confused about something about the nature of like intentions and other stuff. And it's like it's related to why it can be so much easier to just dash off a thread ranting about something when you see somebody post something that's like related to it, or like, they're wrong on the internet and you're like, all right, let me explain. Here's the fucking deal, man. It's like there's a live responsiveness to that conversation that like an essay can sometimes has just from how it wells up in you, like you notice something, you're like, I want to go write about that. But oh, yeah, there's so many things here. Like one of the things that I really want to do, I'd love to do this with you actually. Um but I want to sort of like set it up and do it with various friends, is I want to basically like schedule a time when we we basically like block off something like 2 or 3 hours, and we we show up on a call, and I share a list of anywhere from like 3 to a dozen items that like headlines or topics or themes or something that I'm interested in writing about. And you look at that list and you're like, tell me about this thing. And I tell you one sentence about it. And if like that sentence sort of piques your interest or whatever, then my mission for the next 3 hours or whatever is to write whatever I can on that topic. Maybe 3 hours is even too long. Maybe an hour and a half or something, whatever it is. But it's like my mission is to just write something about that
Mhm,
that is to you, but
mhm.
then gets published to my blog.
Yeah, sure. So I in
And
fact I have an intention with Dinesh, that so both of us care a lot about the nature of attention and focus, like so focus
mhm,
on what you want to see more of. Don't
yeah,
let your attention be swept up by forces, blah blah.
yeah,
And both of us have been procrastinating or stewing on some essay about this for years, I think. And so
mhm,
on Monday, which is tomorrow, I guess, yeah, we're gonna chat for like an hour about it, and then I'll probably, there are now like there's finally one-click AI tools that transcribe YouTube videos into paragraphs. So like I might just
Yeah.
publish that and then
Yeah.
share that with people and see what people say and then go with that. But really
Yeah.
the benefit there is having someone else to loop with, right? Like so you again
Totally.
you might approach and then you might go
Yeah.
in some tangent, but like
Yeah.
it is challenging
Yeah,
to
and that's
do it
different
by
than the thing
yourself.
I'm proposing, but in both cases, there's still a kind of closed loop because it's like if I know I'm writing for you,
Right.
then I don't need to be thinking, what's this for? It's like this
Right.
thing is for causing Visa to be satisfied
Sure.
that he got, that he got to double click on this thing that I said I had stuff to say
Yeah.
about.
I might actually have the same thing that would benefit from me doing that with you. Like I have a bunch of
Yeah.
stuff that
Well,
and
exactly. And
and
we can do it
yeah,
in parallel. And we can like sit
yeah,
there writing, like
sure.
not talking to each other, just kind of next to each other. And then,
Yeah, let's do it.
maybe, you show a draft 3/4 or 2/3 of the way through, and it's like, does
Hmm.
this make sense? And the other person leaves comments, and then you can kind of
Yeah,
clarify or something.
I'll totally do it.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Sounds
Um,
exciting.
yeah, fuck yeah.
Let's do it. Okay, I gotta wrap up soon because my wife is with my son outside alone.
Yeah, I
But
think it's great.
I wanna try. So I do wanna try
Tie it
to
all back.
say again.
Or I was saying tie it all back, but
Yeah,
what
exactly. Like so, the practice that I'm trying to develop, right, is this. It's so funny. I just noticed I have a I just noticed I have a tattoo. No, I just re-looked again at my tattoo, which is about going in loops, basically, right?
yeah.
Um, it's like, oh shit, is that a tattoo? Yeah. Right. So the practice that I'm trying to cultivate is going on digressions, which we've done, and keeping an eye out on keeping an eye on the primary kind of points or the critical points or the main like the primary beats or scenes or however you want to frame it, right? Like that, like so you have the thing, you go on a digression, you have another things maybe, and then you try to come back. So it's the trying to come back thing that I think is a skill that can and should be cultivated. I think I've gotten a lot better at it, but I wasn't even deliberately trying to get better at it. You know what I mean? Like, I was just trying to write well or trying to communicate well. And I think in the process of trying to do it well, you end up trying to loop back. And
Mm.
once you see that that is part of the process, you can now focus on that and be like, okay, let's practice looping back 100 times or whatever and see how it feels and see what it comes back. So
Mm.
yeah, I want to try and recap what we've talked about. So I called you or I texted you saying, hey, let's talk about messes and intentions, right?
Mhm.
I talked a bunch about TV shows and episodes and what I've learned from that.
Yeah.
You mentioned some stuff about so when I said messes, you mentioned the thing about the roommate and the CDs and how it's easier
Someone
to
else's mess, right? Like
it's
doesn't
always
have
easier
the
to deal with someone
intentions
else's mess.
already.
Yeah, because
One
even if
one
you
thing
have
I wanted to mention, just
Mhm.
browser tabs
Yeah.
are also like this.
Hmm. In that that old cluttered old stuff.
The clutter of browser tabs is
Right.
because you are loosely intending
Hmm.
to do something about every single tab that's open.
Right. Yes, correct. And we have so
It's like a
anytime
sneaky to-do list that doesn't like
correct, yeah.
announce itself
I
as
mean,
a to-do
even
list.
a desk that is messy is a bunch of, like just look at my like I'm just like, here is a toy that I intend to set up for my son. Here is it's not so interesting, but it's like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I have like mail,
Yeah,
I have like
totally.
cards, stickers for this was for like I'm making a list of consulting clients I've had. I'm trying to track that, and it's just like every item is a kind of intention, right? There's an implicit intention in there. And yeah, the interesting thing is that when you have an intention at some point in time, it's very context dependent, or there's a lot of context influencing. I mean, so you have a tab, right? And you're thinking a bunch of things when you open that tab. And then
Mhm.
you go to bed and you come there the next day, the tab is there, but you might not remember all of the context that you had when you open that tab. And so
Yeah.
it's like it's like a mystery who done it kind of thing. Like you have to decipher what the intent was. And
Yeah.
sometimes you just, you if you can't recreate the context, it might be best to let it go and trust
Yeah.
that. Then the next
Yeah.
time you
But
encounter a similar context.
part of what's so messy is like sometimes the intention is like it's like you open something and the intention that you have when you open it is something like decide if I want to read this,
Hmm.
but then you like you leave it open for a few days, and now it's as if you have an intention
Obligation.
to read it.
Intention not to read it. Oh yeah, because you haven't read
Well,
it, right?
right. It goes from an intention to like consider it, like
Right.
to just look at this. Maybe I want to read it, and
Right.
it sort of like turns into like, oh, I gotta read this.
Right. And I think a tragic thing about the nature of states, what a sentence, of like like off on states or whatever, is that at the time you write it or at the time you open the tab or whatever, it might be very nebulous. And then when you get back to it, it's there and it's a thing now. And you feel like, oh, I must have meant something by this. But like it might not be, it might just be
Mm-hmm.
very it's just it's like you write down something like the quote the joke or whatever. It's like there's nothing as permanent as a temporary solution. Like you
Oh,
just
I have a quote about that I think you'd quite like also. Um, which is like I I like to warn people about the time being,
Mhm.
and they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Well, it sounds like you decided to do that for the time being, like just for the time being."
Oh shit,
But
that's
it
good.
turns out the time being is a hungry
Wait,
beast.
have you tweeted
Demands
this?
ever further sacrifice. I have tweeted this. Yeah.
That's,
I've been meaning to
okay.
make a new graphic about it.
I'm searching from Malcolm Ocean time being. I don't
Yeah,
know.
we said we were going to do this for the time being, and we did, but the time being is a hungry god, and he demanded ever more sacrifice. Um, and then we tried to make some AI art to like go with the time being, but at that time AI art was not as good, and so what came out was pretty mediocre. Um, I've been meaning to make a new tweet that like has an image in the tweet already. Um,
I'm just gonna wait, pull out the dash. Anyway,
yeah. Anyway, we can
uh
sign off.
so can you tell me like did anything click for you in the course of this conversation that you think is notable?
Um, yeah, I think I got a slightly better sense of the thing that I saw you write about in terms of the breakthrough or something. Like there's something about beginning with the concrete and like letting the principle sort of find its way in rather than being like oh yeah, man, everything relates to so many other things. It's just so many things I want to say, man. Two hybrid factor people talking.
Yeah, if
uh,
if if you if you have time, like write me a note. Like that would be
yeah,
super useful. Like just like, again like 5 minutes. So just on
yeah,
the
yeah.
subject of the call we just had. Dot dot
Yeah,
dot. Yeah.
yeah,
If you want to do a Twitter thread, that'd be cool. If you want to do I mean, whatever feels natural to you.
yeah,
If
yeah.
you like, if
Cool.
you're like, fuck it, you can fuck it.
Yeah. I'm going to bed pretty shortly, but
Oh, sure. Okay.
um, yeah.
Then I will just end it and I'll upload it later once I'm done with family stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds good. All
Cool.
right, man. This has
Had
been
fun
great.
chatting, man. Always good to see you.
Take care. Yeah, yeah.
Take care.
This has
Bye
been
bye.
great.
See you soon.